responsive website page called index.html and you can see in the code over here on the right, it's the basic setup that we've been using for the structural part, where we have a header, nav, I have a side left and right, and a footer at the bottom of this. On this one, however, we aren't using fixed pixel dimensions. Instead, if I go up to the CSS styling, I've created a style for the mic header and navigation, but I'm using percentages this time, and that allows for fluid movement of these boxes versus what we were doing before with the fixed boxes. So when we were to if we were to drag this in a browser right now, everything would kind of collapse and change shape and not be fixed. And that's all occurring over here in these styles, where I've set a margin left, which is 5% here on the left, 5% on the right, and then whatever's left over between those two would be the width of the actual content, which I have a width of 90%. So there's some calculating in here as far as percentages go, and it's not much different than fixed. You know, if you add padding and things like that, you have to take that into account as part of the width. And then, as you can see, as I go through, I just add some other basic elements, some text and some color in here. The other thing that's different is that I'm using a dot header mic up here in the styling. That is a class versus the pound header mic, which is what we were using for a fixed website. So either of those would work. It's just that a dot header mic can be used more as a global style throughout the website versus a pound, which is more to identify just a box, and we would only kind of use it one time. So on this time, I created a site that is completely built with classes and not IDs. So as I had mentioned before, you can really do either. On this one for Fluid, I've decided to use dot header mics in here. So classes always start with a dot and then the name of the style that you want to use. So take a look through the coding here on the right, and then just watch over on the left. You know, if I were to move this, you can see that things start to change shape, but it means that maintains that 15% margin on either side. You can also see something new here. There's this little grab bar here, which you can click and drag to change the shape of that, versus going right into the browser and doing it there. You can work with it here. So, you know, once the basic structure is set up, I have an aside left and right here, and I'm using a float left right here for that one, and I'm using a float right for this one right here. And you can just kind of look at the percentages that I've created for each one of those. All of these really need to add up to, you know, a total width of 100%, including the margins. So, so that's the difference between a fixed and a fluid grid. So review that, just look through this. Then finally, we have to discuss, you know, how do you go about setting up this website for different devices. So if you were to go to an iPad or an iPhone, you would probably want to change the look and feel of this to accommodate for smaller screen sizes. And that's called adding a media query, which is, I'm just kind of circling up here. You'll see a ruler guide up here. If you don't see this, just go to Window or View Rulers and turn that on. And you'll see this thing called click plus on the ruler to add media query. So in order to design for mobile devices, we need to create media queries. And all that does is it adds some additional styling over here based off the device that that person has in hand. And so essentially, we are going to add some media queries here in the CSS styling, so that if someone has an iPhone, for example, the styling would change out and override everything that's above here, which we could consider the global type styling. So for instance, if I went to an iPhone, if I were to drag this down to something small, you can see that the texture on the right is really too hard to read, and we would probably want to take off the float left and float right on these, so that welcome to Saturday is on its own horizontal line, and then this text here for the aside right actually falls below here. And so what we could do is create a media query for that iPhone and tell welcome to Sunday here to be not to float left, and then do the same here and not to float right for this. So it's just changing out a few styles within a media query to make this actually happen. So if we look again over at the global text styling over on the right, you're not going to do much more work to this, if at all. Now what we do is we create some media queries down here and only change out some of the styling very slightly to change the look and feel for the smaller device. So here's how you do it. When we create a media query, it actually turns into a red text in here within the code. All my styling is located on my HTML page, so eventually I could go to an external style sheet, but for now, the example will show it within this whole web page. So it's asking up here to add a new media query, click on the plus sign. Well, the plus sign is right over here up in the upper right. You can see the plus right there. And so what happens is, you kind of think about, what is it that I'm using? Am I using an iPad, or is this going to be viewed on the desktop or an iPhone? Anything over 800, which is on the ruler right here, we would consider a desktop. Anything from 800 down to, let's just say 450, depending on the device. So anywhere between 450 and 800 would be the iPad size. And then anything below 450 would be an iPhone or a smartphone device. So what we want to do is create a media query, or what we call breakpoints, for each one of those different devices: desktop, iPad, and iPhone. So it's asking us to click on the plus sign. So if I come down to, and I take this scroller bar and go down to 800 and hit the plus sign, you get this green color on the left and this purple color on the right. And then it just says click to add a media query. So if I click on this purple right here, it says, all right, minimum width of 800, what's your maximum width? So anything over 800, we are going to use our global style. So let's just select the styles that we have now, which is on the style tag here, which is within the website itself. If we had an external style sheet, we'd have to select that or create one. So anything that's greater than 800, we'll just leave it as minimum width 800, and then all we do is just hit OK. So it creates this breakpoint right here, and then what we want to do is create a media query that happens between 450 and 800. So if I click on the plus sign again, and now I hit on the left hand side, the green area, I want to say, all right, yes, so the max width is 800 because that's already been established here. The minimum width will say 450. That'll go in the CSS source file right here under style, and then I'll just hit OK. And now you'll see that my minimum width is 450 and max is 800. So if someone has an iPad, anything that happens in this blue area as far as dimension, that will use its own style, or it'll have some styling that'll override the global styling here. And then finally, what we do is we bring our scroll bar down to 450, and then we hit the plus sign here, and then we just click on the one on the left hand side, and it's already got it filled out for us. Essentially it says max width 450 is what we want. We don't need a minimum width here, so we'll just make sure it's in style, which is right over here in our style sheets on that page. We'll hit OK, and now I've got the three devices, and obviously you could create many different breakpoints in here, but for this project we'll concentrate on the iPhone, the iPad in the blue, and anything greater than the iPad, which would be desktop, would be the purple area. So what will happen is as we drag this between these, the look and feel of the website is going to change depending on the style that we add within these breakpoints. So let's take a look at this, our styling over here. So I'm going to drag this open so we can see. So if I come down below all the original styling here, you'll see that these 3 breakpoints, which are the 3 colors up here, have been added here in red within the styling down here. And so, you know, what we could do is whatever we do down here, it's essentially going to override what happens up above here. So there, you know, there is a hierarchy on how this is actually built. Just for this example, what I'll just do is I'll just quick change out some styling for our smartphone, which would be this area right in here. Okay. So if we look over at our CSS designer in here, up in the upper right, you'll see that the media queries have been added under this thing called app media, which is below sources. Here's our style. This is all our styling for the CSS within this page. We may have an external style sheet at some time, but right now all our styles are here, the globals, and then you'll see that the 3 breakpoints are here, which are actually down over here in the code. So let's say I wanted to, you know, if I were to come down to maybe 450 or below, and I wanted this to take on a different look to make it read better. And so I would want to take out, you know, the float left and the float right and see what happens. So what you want to do is you want to take, for instance, the styling for side right and a side left are right here. I could just Command C, copy that, and paste that down here in the 450 media query right here. So nothing's going to change. As a matter of fact, I'm going to go up here to the upper left hand corner, and I'm just going to select live as the live view here. And now that will put me into kind of a styling where I can actually work on this in kind of like the live view. Anything that I change, it'll change automatically here. I can always turn that off too if I want to. But now that I've copied and pasted the styles, the global styles, into that 450 you know, breakpoint, now it occurs down here. So here are those 2 that I copied in, right? So if I go to a side left and I say, all right, I'm going to take off the float left, and I'll go to the side right and take off the float right. And then what I want to do is come up here, and now the percentages are going to be different too. It's no longer 35%. So it's probably going to be, you know, something. So I'm just clicking and dragging as such to about 90%. And then if I go down to the side right, you know, and change out that to 90%, now you can see just by taking off the left and right float for that media query for the 450, I'm clicking right up here for the 450. I now have made the nav, or this Welcome to Sunday horizontal, and this one. And that's really all I needed to do. So if I go back up to the styling, and let's just go to the design view here. We'll go to split view. Just by you know, taking the global a side left and a side right and adding it to 450 here, and taking off the left float and right float and then changing the width, now I've kind of created this new look and feel for my iPhone. So if I go back to the live view here and drag this to the right, now you can see that if I were to drag below 450, it now takes on that breakpoint as an override. Okay. And then if I go back here, it jumps back to the original size, and nothing happens, as I go further. So the only thing I changed right now was the max width breakpoint for an iPhone, and all I did was take off the left and right floats and change the percentage of the size. And so now that's working for me. So, when you're designing for mobile devices, you can go either way, but I usually start with the desktop, get that built. If there's any change I need to make as far as iPad, I add that to the min width and max width over here. And then finally, if I go down below here, I make some final adjustments there. So I think a good example of that one that I like is Buffalo Wild Wings, where if you go to the desktop, it's one look and feel. And if you were to go to their iPhone app, it's kind of more vertical and less is in there. It reads a lot better. So, today you've got to kind of think about designing for all the devices, and that's how you change out the look and feel of the website, is by adding these media queries. So with that said, I think that's all I've got. Now I have a document called Responsive Site that's located on Course Documents that has this completed up to, I think, like a smartphone styling. So you can take a look at that as well. But what you're going to need to do is build out your web page. You can use IDs or classes, but now you're going to work in percentages and kind of build that as a desktop. You're going to come back, add your media queries, and then finally all you might do just to make a little bit of a change to the Gourmet Market is to maybe add a style to change it up for the smartphone, and maybe it's just a color change as far as styling goes for your iPad. So I think that's it. If you have any questions, just email me, but I'll get this out for everyone to see.